Queen Elizabeth II's reign almost never happened after Mother's accident. Inside the downplayed 1926 incident that nearly changed the course of the British monarchy. In the late summer of 1926, the future of the British throne hung on a single, fragile thread. The Duchess of York, later known as Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, nearly lost her life. What began as a routine pregnancy suddenly turned into a medical emergency that shook the royal family. Doctors warned that both mother and child were at grave risk during those critical days. The Duchess, then only 25 years old, was carrying her first child, the future Queen Elizabeth II. Her labor had been long, difficult and increasingly dangerous as complications set in. Medical bulletins issued from 17 Bruton Street in Mayfair were deliberately vague and reassuring. Behind the closed doors, however, the situation was far more alarming than the public ever knew. Royal physicians summoned the most experienced obstetricians available in London. They prepared for the worst outcome, the very real possibility that neither would survive. The crisis reached its peak on the night of the 21st of April 1926. The Duchess endured hours of excruciating pain while the baby remained in distress. Surgeons debated whether to perform a caesarean section, a procedure still considered highly risky in 1926. At that time, such operations carried a high mortality rate for both mother and infant. The medical team ultimately decided against surgery and chose to continue with natural delivery. After more than 40 hours of labor, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was finally born safely. The newborn princess weighed 8 pounds 7 ounces and arrived at 2:40 in the morning. Her arrival was announced with a simple bulletin posted outside the house. The public had no idea how close the nation had come to losing its future queen. The palace and medical staff deliberately downplayed the severity of the ordeal. Contemporary newspapers carried only brief, cheerful reports of a normal birth. There was no mention of the prolonged labor, the danger, or the anxious consultations. This careful management of information was typical of the royal household in the 1920s. The monarchy preferred to project an image of calm strength and continuity at all times. Had the Duchess or the baby not survived, the line of succession would have been dramatically altered. The throne would have passed to the Duke of York's younger brothers in due course. Prince Albert, later King George VI, would have remained a secondary figure. The entire course of 20th century British history might have unfolded very differently. Elizabeth II would never have become queen, and the modern Elizabethan era would never have existed. The cultural, political and social landscape of Britain would have been profoundly changed. The Duchess recovered slowly after the exhausting delivery. She remained weak for several weeks and required careful nursing at home. The new princess was christened in the private chapel at Buckingham Palace on the 29th of May 1926. Her godparents included King George V, Queen Mary and several other senior royals. Even at her christening, the full story of the birth remained closely guarded. Only the immediate family and medical attendants knew how near disaster had come. Decades later, the Queen Mother herself spoke sparingly about the ordeal. In private conversations, she admitted it had been the most terrifying experience of her early life. Medical historians who have studied the case believe the Duchess very likely suffered from preeclampsia. High blood pressure, severe swelling and potential organ strain were common in such complicated labors. The decision to avoid a caesarean was based on the high risks associated with the operation at that time. Antibiotics were not yet widely available and surgical infection rates were alarmingly high. The safe arrival of the princess was therefore considered something of a medical miracle. It allowed the York household to resume its quiet domestic routine in the months that followed. The little girl known within the family as Lilibet grew up unaware of how close she came to never existing. She enjoyed a relatively normal childhood, shielded from the burdens of her future destiny. It was not until the abdication crisis of 1936 that her path to the throne became clear. Her uncle Edward VIII's decision to marry Wallis Simpson changed everything overnight. Suddenly the shy second son became King George VI and the 10-year-old princess became heir presumptive. The 1926 crisis that nearly ended her life now seemed like a distant and almost forgotten shadow. Historians often note how delicately balanced the line of succession really was in the early 20th century. A single medical emergency could have rewritten the entire modern history of the monarchy. The deliberate downplaying of the birth complications served a larger purpose. It preserved the image of effortless royal continuity during a period of national uncertainty. Britain in 1926 was still recovering from the Great War and facing economic hardship. The royal family was expected to embody stability and quiet strength above all else. By keeping the danger hidden, the palace ensured that public confidence remained unshaken. The birth was presented as a joyful, uncomplicated event, exactly as the nation needed to see it. Looking back, the 1926 incident stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of history. One difficult labor, one medical decision could have altered the course of a kingdom. Elizabeth II went on to become the longest reigning monarch in British history. Her 70-year rule brought stability, change and continuity through decades of transformation. Yet every time she appeared on the balcony or delivered a Christmas broadcast, a silent question lingered in the minds of those who knew the full story. What if that April night in 1926 had ended differently? The Duchess of York might not have survived. The princess might never have been born. The throne would have passed along a different line and the world would look very different today. The fact that history unfolded as it did feels almost providential to some observers. A single safe delivery allowed one of the most remarkable reigns in British history to begin. King Charles III now carries forward the legacy of his mother's long reign. He frequently speaks of the duty and service that defined Elizabeth II's life. The 1926 crisis that nearly prevented her birth is rarely mentioned in public. It remains one of those hidden footnotes known mainly to historians and royal insiders. Yet its significance cannot be overstated. A single night of danger nearly rewrote the entire 20th century for Britain. Today, when we reflect on the life and reign of Queen Elizabeth II, we might also pause to remember the anxious hours in Bruton Street in April 1926. We might consider the doctors, the nurses and the family members who waited in silence. We might imagine the relief that swept through the house when the baby finally cried. That cry marked the beginning of an era that would span 7 decades. It ensured that a small girl named Elizabeth would one day become queen. The downplayed incident of 1926 reminds us how delicately history is balanced. Sometimes the greatest events hang on the smallest and most human of moments. One difficult labor, one mother's courage, one child's safe arrival. These were the threads that wove the tapestry of modern Britain. And so when we celebrate the life of Queen Elizabeth II, we might also quietly acknowledge the miracle that allowed it to happen at all. The 1926 birth crisis remains one of the monarchy's best-kept secrets. It is the story of how the longest reign in British history almost